Why has so much stuff been cut or changed for Attack on Titan Season 3? So what's up guys, Foxen here. Let's talk about all the changes for Attack on Titan Season 3 Episode 1. So I've been working on this for quite a while. It really feels like they took the first 7 chapters of the Uprising arc, added some good stuff like bananas and apples, then blended it all together. Episode 1 for Attack on Titan Season 3 is a cup of that Titan smoothie. But just notice, there's still a good amount of that smoothie left over in the blender. Right now it's still a question about whether you're gonna get a taste of that later, or whether it's gonna be dumped in the trash. What this all means for episode 1 is that there's been a lot of changes, removals, new additions, and a lot of previous scenes condensed. Let's look at episode 1 in more in depth, and perhaps in more detail than you asked for. By the way, really quickly before starting, let me just mention that this type of video took an extremely long amount of time. So please like and definitely let me know down below if you want to see more of these. I'm not sure right now if I'm going to be physically able to do these weekly. I guess I'll decide on your guys' feedback. As for spoilers within this, I'm keeping this to only spoilers involving the chapters that are covered by this episode. So anything up to Levi meeting up Kenny on the rooftop is fair game. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. At the very start of this episode, you have Eren staring off into the distance. This was definitely a completely new scene added to the anime. You don't see this anywhere in the Uprising arc. First actual episode scene up is the cabin scene. So the Survey Corps is hiding away. First change up is actually when Potato Girl is stealing that bread. Notice how in the anime the jewel got moved from the left side to the right. Also in the anime, Historia got taken out of the whole Sasha bread situation. Instead, Coney took her spot. Getting to one of the things cut from the anime, as all of the friends are having a happy good old time, in the manga, Eren actually feels down for a second, just about how these guys remind him of the previous Levi squad. Why was this cut out? Perhaps just not to ruin the mood and to move things more quickly. I would say that this might appear later on, but just randomly flashing back to this may not work so well. Next up, the whole Levi daddy scene at the table. In the anime, Levi tells Eren about how Hanji wants to start the experiment soon, and then it cuts right to that. However, in the manga, there was much more to this conversation. They continued talking for a good while. They did go into details about how they wanted Eren to get hard to plug up Wall Maria's hole. The manga showed how this was Armin's plan, and then he goes into details about it. Right here, Armin mentions how the wall seems to be made out of titans. Since they were able to do it in the past, maybe Eren can do it too. They just gotta try this out at nighttime. Notice that this chunk of dialogue from Armin kind of got moved around to the Titan experiment. Right here, it was instead Levi that told a condensed version of all of this to Armin, who was right next to him. As for some other stuff that was cut before the Titan experiment, Hanji goes on to explain how she wants to test everything regarding Eren's Titan power. This of course includes trying to use the founding Titan power once more. Hanji wants to get started as soon as possible, but unfortunately she thinks it's best for Eren to lay low. Hanji was previously keeping it to herself, but right here Hanji reveals how Nick has been murdered. Notably, you find this out later in the anime. Next up, the whole Titan training scene. From the anime, they actually cut quite a few amount of dialogue from Hanji from this. The anime doesn't show Hanji mentioning how Eren seems to be a lot more fused with the Titan than usual, almost as if they're becoming one single being. Perhaps Eren would even turn into a Titan permanently if they allowed him to stay like that. And Hanji definitely wanted to try it out. I'm kinda disappointed that they cut this out since you got less of insane Hanji. But more importantly, they did cut out some Titan info and made Hanji look better in the process. Let's see if they get back to this in a flashback. As for something added in the anime, Levi did add greater emphasis about how Historia was important. This included a flashback to what Nick was saying about Historia perhaps knowing the secrets of the walls, or one day being able to learn about them. Something else that also got cut from the anime was the shot of Eren's melted body and face healing up in the wagon. Unfortunately, this also included Hanji's fun comment about how Eren would go back to being handsome as soon as possible. Another smaller cut involved Hanji's thoughts as they were leaving the area. She made a note about how anyone close to the area would be able to see Eren's Titan smoke whenever he became his Titan. This is why they were surely being watched. The smoke dialogue makes sense being cut from the anime, since the anime has a Titan light show instead. However, the anime shot of this still includes that smoke. The only difference is that the smoke is coming from the leftover Titan carcass. Oh, and the anime also cut out Cowboy Coney and Cowboy Sasha. Also, no small wagon in this forest shot. So far it seems like Hanji has taken the most of views from the anime cuts. Next up, you have a completely new anime scene with this interaction between Levi and Erwin, which happens post Eren's training. In the manga, however, the next time you see Erwin, he was already on his way to Wall Sina to get to the royal capital. Right here, Erwin mentions something about plugging up the Walmart hole within a day. This of course being something that Armin previously mentioned in the manga from the conversation that was cut. Some of the dialogue here also seems similar to some of the stuff that Hanji mentioned from the cut scene post Eren's training. Some of this involved the questioning of why the Race family would know the secrets of the walls instead of the king. Next up, another anime original shot, which is Pastor Nick in the room getting a knock late at nighttime. Then he was never heard from again. In the manga, Hanji brought up Nick being killed long after it already happened, which was before Eren was trying to get his Titan up. Next up, the kitchen cabin scene. Instead of Eren suddenly waking up post his Titan training scene, it seems like they combined 3 scenes from the manga together here. The cabin scene did happen in the manga, however, it happened after Hanji told everyone about Nick's death, but before they started Eren's Titan training. Right here, some of the scouts' conversation remains from the original scene. In the anime, Eren still mentions how he was asleep for a whole day after the Titan exhaustion. Notably, the anime asks Eren blaming himself and feeling bad about his failure since it's now preventing their Wall Maria operation. This whole thing was actually similar to what Eren said post-training in the manga, so another manga piece moved or condensed. In the anime, there is some added support from Mikasa towards Eren. From Koni here, you have him feeling terrible when he recalls what the Beast Titan did to his family and village. Cut from this scene was Koni specifically bringing up what Ymir did about how she lied to his face in the past. Also cut was Historia letting Koni know that Ymir was doing him a favor in her own way. Next up, after Mikasa and Koni leave for their post duty, this whole interaction between Historia and Eren is a completely different scene that happened much later. Originally, when they used the horseboy cosplaying as Eren and best girl Armin, Historia and Eren stayed behind in a different hideout. This is where they had that chat from the anime. The anime, however, cuts straight into the middle of the conversation where it focuses on Historia. The dialogue from Historia mentioning how everyone has some goals and her talking about Ymir is moved around a bit. Eren then trying to comfort Historia is different from the manga. Eren knows about how Historia is finally talking again. Apparently Historia telling everyone about her past has happened in the anime, just hasn't been shown yet. Eren mentions about how since that time, Historia has actually stopped talking and smiling. The manga doesn't have this at all. There's only a short thought from Eren that hints at this, but it feels almost like a stretch to claim this is that scene from the manga. Historia then goes on to mention how she's not this good girl. Eren comforts her, telling her she's way better this way, as a very honest girl. This whole interaction was condensed by about half from the manga version. Notably, anime Historia cuts out a lot of details about how terrible her upbringing was. The manga also ends the scene, then switches to the warehouse after Eren tells her she's a very honest girl. Overall in the anime, Eren comes off as being much calmer and caring when he's telling all of this to Historia. Compared to the manga, he seemed almost to be a little bit angry partway through this. Added to this scene, anime Eren brings up Ymir, which triggers him recalling Ymir's past conversation. In the manga, however, Eren didn't recall this until several chapters later. Eren originally recalled this during his sleep, so you quickly see Eren getting out of bed and trying to find Hanji. By the way, just to add to this whole Titan training scene, afterwards in the anime, Hanji never got the chance to go into the full details of it. This is something I'm sure they're going to cover in a flashback. Next up, Pastor Nick's death. You see anime Hanji suddenly coming back to tell everyone about this information. However, manga Hanji reveals this before Eren's Titan training. Notably, the anime already has Hanji at the scene instead of showing you Hanji rushing down the hall there. In the anime version, it's actually pretty hard to tell that anything weird happened to his nails. The manga makes this pretty obvious. Perhaps it'll be much clearer on the Blu-ray version. As for Hanji's interaction with this military police guy, the anime either cuts or condenses a lot of dialogue from Hanji. They cut the line from Hanji when she tells her that Nick was her buddy. The anime further cuts the dialogue from Hanji demanding to know why someone would break into the military housing. Anime Hanji only asked about the nails instead of asking a lot more questions. Manga Hanji looked a lot more pissed here too. The anime also cuts a lot of detail from the military guy. He doesn't go into detail in the anime insulting the Survey Corps. It also cuts him saying that the Survey Corps has no experience in this type of field. And you don't even have the line from him asking Hanji whether she's scared after she became silent. Anime Hanji notably condenses and cuts a good chunk of the explanation regarding who Nick was and why she put Nick in the barracks there. Anyway, back to the cabin post-flashback. The anime version of the cabin removed 3 plates on the wall. Super major change. From here, anime Levi cuts straight into asking about Nick's nails. However, a huge chunk of dialogue between Levi and Hanji is cut from here. Some of it involves Eren being informed about the situation, them discussing about the potential enemies inside and outside of the walls, and about how the military police is acting more unusual now. So perhaps there's another part of the military police taking action. Unfortunately, the anime survey corps is interrupted by Nifa. Here she brings him Erwin's message. Further cut from the manga is Levi's discussion about this. In the manga, Levi puts both of their plans on the table. Either they escape before they're attacked, or they go after whoever is going after them first. Hanji decides to do both of them at the same time. By the way, do notice how manga Nifa was present during this whole conversation, so the anime gave a little more to Nifa to do. Next up, you have the whole anime scene of the survey corps ditching their hideout. The anime version of this is several times longer than the manga version. Most of this comes down to the added dialogue and some other actions. Compare these changes to the manga. First off, you have manga Levi having everyone read Erwin's letter. Compare this to anime Levi where he just kept it to himself. Manga Levi then wants anyone that's willing to trust Erwin to follow him. Once they're outside, it seems that everyone is already on board with the plan and knows what they're doing. When they're outside, anime Levi tells them that all survey corps operations got frozen. They also specifically want Eren and Historia to be handed over. In the manga, this doesn't happen until a lot later. It's not until Erwin and the survey corps get framed for some murder. And also in the manga, they didn't specify it being Eren and Historia. It was everyone in the survey corps that had to report to the capital. The anime added the scene of Erwin being summoned to the royal capital. Nifa also just happened to be nearby. In the manga, Erwin does get this summon. However, when he finds out about this, Erwin is already in the carriage on his way there. After this flashback, everything regarding the details of their plans in the anime is all new content. Notably, they make it clear where they're heading, and which characters are going with Hanji or Levi as they're splitting up. As for one notable difference and change here, in the anime, they do move the scene here where Eren gives Hanji the letter with Ymir's conversation that he recalled earlier. By the way, do notice this nice anime addition, which was Kenny and his blonde assistant overlooking the hideout being raided. Next up, this episode he had that Titan Truth mid-info card. The stuff revealed here is actually something that should have happened at the end of season 2. Originally, Hanji and Erwin actually discussed this during their conversation about Koni's mother Titan. Manga readers were wondering why this Titan info got cut from the scene. And now it's back. Well, kind of. Next up, we have the scene at Tross where the survey corps is setting up not Eren and best girl Armin. Notice here something completely new added to the anime, which is this whole festival regarding the royal family. This was not in the manga. Part of this involved giving Sasha and Koni more screen time as they talked about this yearly event. Notice how the anime added something interesting, this eco-friendly flag. I gotta talk about this later on. Next up, that king throne scene. This whole scene involving the king and his friends was a new scene added for the anime. The manga did have a similar shot, but it was really only as Erwin was referencing the king. In the anime, however, they go into details about the rations they're giving out. For some reason, they want to raise their public approval. This of course being related to the festival from earlier. The interaction here is her first introduction to Rod Reyes. Notably, the manga never showed Rod and the king in the same room. So overall, the scene is just adding more connective tissue. And you get more of this as they hint to unleashing Kenny going after the survey corps. Next up, the kidnapping scene. Let me mention that Horseboy and Better Historia getting kidnapped is the same from the manga. However, the stuff that happened right before their kidnapping got cut. Right before this, the manga gives you a few pages of the survey corps and Levi walking down the streets. From this, Levi gets quite the attention from workers nearby. These guys go as far as getting into Levi's face after blaming the survey corps about their lives being so miserable now. One of these guys even has the balls to grab Levi before the kidnapping happened. As for Rio Historia and Eren, while the survey corps' plan is in action with the body doubles, both of these two are in a different wagon. At this point in the manga, these two are simply waiting it out in a different hideout. This actually is where Eren had his conversation with Historia about being a normal girl from earlier in the episode. Next up, Armin getting tortured. Yes, best girl getting felt up was 99%. Notably, you have one additional line from the bastard feeling up Armin, which is that Armin feels a lot more muscular than expected. Oh, I'm sure there's an extra muscle in there. As for Levi and Mikasa on the rooftop, one major change here. In the anime, you have Levi informing Mikasa about Kenny, and then he takes off. The anime actually completely removed Levi from the warehouse scene. Originally, it was Levi that joined Mikasa in kicking these guys' ass. I guess all the ass now went to Mikasa and the anime. As for within the warehouse, notably the anime has added the Reeve's son tagging along with the father. Also, now that Levi's cut, that slam that Levi did in the manga is now done by Mikasa. Since Reeve Jr. was also added, Mikasa is the one that takes him down with that fun kick of hers. So 200% more ass kicked by Mikasa in the anime. As for the aftermath of this whole thing, the anime so far has either cut or not shown anything regarding the Reeve's boss. Notably, Armin having an interesting interaction with the guy who felt him up was cut. As for a huge change, this involves something that originally happened between Levi and the interaction with the Reeve's boss. After the whole warehouse scene, Levi and the Reeve's boss actually come to some understanding and make a deal. Then there's a whole ton of things that happened between that scene and the scene in the manga where Kenny shows up on the rooftop. Let's see if they actually managed to work this Reeve's boss deal back in the anime. This is going to be very interesting to see. Alright, so now we're at the rooftop scene with Levi in the anime. The anime so far has cut out the Reeve's deal, real Eren and his story getting kidnapped, and 50 Shades of Hanji. Of course, they also cut out his story on Erwin's past, but that could be more easily moved around via flashback. Also, do notice in the manga rooftop scene, Levi and Nifa were actually overlooking Eren and his story being taken away in coffins. Next up, now for Kenny's grand entrance. Unfortunately, Kenny made Nifa's face disappear. So about this, Nifa actually looked much worse in the manga when she got her face blown off. The anime notably decided to focus more on Levi's reaction to seeing her death. Although do notice that they added the shot of Nifa's body twitching. Oh my god. In the anime, I'm not even sure if more Surrey-core guys got killed, besides the goggles dude. The manga does show the other headshots from Levi's group. Seems that the anime added this chest plating that wasn't present in the manga. I got a feeling this will come and play in the upcoming bar showdown scene. And then you have this completely new shot from the anime, which I loved. It's that scene of Kenny's squad coming in and then the ton of guys in the sky. Originally in the manga, Levi got his ass out of there before he got surrounded. So talk about getting that cliffhanger ending in the anime. Alright, so that was all the juicy changes and details. And so far I've been recording this for past an hour. It's so hot in here, I feel like I'm about to pass out. And yes, I am completely stripped down. So I'm hoping you enjoyed this more detailed breakdown. Definitely like and subscribe if you want these weekly. Let's see if I actually want to make another one of these after this. But anyway, more important, let me hear from you. Question of the day. How do you feel about all these changes? Especially the major ones. Did you think this episode was too fast paced? Does anyone out there think the anime should have followed the manga more closely? Anyway, definitely give us a colossal thumbs up and subscribe. If you're new here, I put out 5+ anime videos a week. That includes a ton of Attack on Titan content. Definitely check out my full breakdown on the Season 3 opening. Does it deserve all the hate it's getting? Also, if you want to find out more about Kenny, don't miss my full spoiler video. And I'll see you guys later.